Hi, welcome to this video where we are going to talk about caching. Caching is a very powerful construct which Spark gives us to perform iterative processing in an efficient and a faster manner. With caching, you can keep the content of an RDD or a processed RDD in memory and use that result for subsequent processing. This is very much useful if one of the RDDs is getting accessed through different actions, or the children of that RDD are getting accessed through different actions repeatedly. Caching is something which was not there in the original MapReduce, and Spark, which is an evolution of MapReduce, has this feature of caching. We'll talk more about caching. We know that RDDs do not keep data in memory all the time. By default, whenever RDDs are computed, uh, there is lots of temporary data generated, transient data generated. It is shuffled across to get the final result. But with caching, you can keep the actual content of RDD in memory. Let's get us started and talk about the need to cache an RDD. So let's say we have created one RDD from a file and filtered that RDD to generate one more RDD, selected some specific fields for our use case, and there is some another RDD through which we want to join these two. And this is how our result RDD is going to look like. On this result RDD, after we have joined it, we perform different set of actions. Here I have shown 3 actions, but it may happen that there can be more than one action called, and each action, as you know, is going to process the entire pipeline. So for each action, this first RDD is going to be constructed from the file. It has to pass through filter and selection of the fields. Second RDD is also going to be created from the file and to pass through any other transformation if it has in between, and then join has to be performed, which is an expensive operation. So depending upon the criticality of your application, different actions can have different latencies. Even if they are using a Spark, but they are reading the file, they are undergoing shuffle and other transformations. So your each action is going to take some time. What about if you try to think that okay, let me read the file, first file, second file, perform the shuffle and get the result. How is that result obtained? When the moment you call the first action. So let us assume that this is our first action on the result RDD. What would be the situation be if during the first action itself, where we are computing a result RDD, we keep the content of this RDD in memory? If that is a possibility, and again, when I say memory, it's not the memory of the driver machine, it's the memory which is distributed across all the nodes. So if you have, say, each node or say each executor, once we have each executor of say 10 gigabytes, and you have 100 such executors, you have a total of 1000 gigabytes, which is approximately a terabyte. Even if you use say a 20% of that memory for your storage, well, we will learn more about it, that Spark uses some portion of the memory for storage and some portion of the memory for execution. So even if you use say a very small number, 20% for storage, you are going to you are able to keep 200 gigabytes of data in memory. Well, that's not a small amount of memory. If you want more, you can either increase the size of the executors, or you can increase the number of executors, and you can hit, or you can access terabytes of RAM in a distributed storage. So if you are able to keep the content of the RDD in memory, and also since RDDs are partitioned, it's quite easy, it's quite intrinsic to keep the content of RDDs in memory distributed across multiple machines. Well, anyhow, if this is in memory, then the subsequent action is not going to trigger the pipeline overall. It's going to get the result from the in-memory result of the result RDD. Similarly, the third action is also going to be very fast. It's going to pick directly the result of, it's going to directly pick the content of result RDD. So you skip the reading of files to create the RDD over here and over here. You also kind of avoid multiple joins. Not only this, if there is any other RDD which depends on the result RDD, let's say I have got some RDD called as RDD3, and if you call any action on this RDD3, RDD3 is going to take advantage of the cache result of result RDD. So this is how caching can speed up your process whenever there is an iterative processing or a kind of incremental processing over an RDD, or you can say if your RDD is called in action multiple times. Let's talk more about RDD's caching. How to cache an RDD? Well, in order to cache an RDD, there is a function called as cache and persist. There are two functions available. You can also choose a storage level. Like, how do you want to cache the RDD? Do you want to keep it in memory or disk or a combination of that? Let's talk about all those things. When persisting an RDD, its partitions are stored in memory and reused. It's the key tool for iterative and interactive use case. Either you can call the persist method on the RDD or cache method on the RDD to cache it. Well, persist method can accept different storage levels. So that's kind of more generic function, which is quite encouraged to be used. Cache is a shorthand notation where you want to keep things only in memory. You don't have the flexibility to choose a different storage level, but both, just to understand, there are both options available to cache it. So cache is something like persisting only in memory, but when you say persist, you can choose a different storage level. What is the storage level? We will be discussing it in the next upcoming slides. So whenever you cache an RDD, immediately the content is not loaded in the memory. The first time an action is called on the RDD, that triggers the pipeline, and that is the action responsible to cache the content of the RDD. So the point I want to tell you over here is that if you have an RDD, if you call rdd.cache, the content of the RDD will not be saved in memory. Now, if you call rdd.count, count is one of the action. Now, this is going to trigger the lineage. It's going to execute the DAG. So RDD may have been computed from some other RDD or some other file. That lineage will be executed, and at that point of time, this cache is going to keep things in memory. So caching is quite lazy unless the first action is called caching has actually no effect. And once this action is finished, now this RDD is cached. If you call any further action, let's say rdd.take5, then it's going to hit the cache and get the result from this cache. Let's get ahead. If any partition of the RDD is lost, that will be recomputed whenever any action needs that. When the application finishes through either successfully or with error, or when the user says calls unpersist method, the cached RDD is removed. It's removed from the RDD is removed from the cache. To manually unpersist, you can call this unpersist method, as we talked about now. Now, let's talk about the failure handling. We have constructed, say this is G is our RDD, which has been cached. And one of the partition fails, either G or F. I mean, okay, let's kind of think in that situation. Let's say F is a cache RDD, not G, but F is a cache RDD, and one of the partition was kept in memory. Memory of one of the machines, and that machine has and that machine has gone down, so this partition will be lost. So whenever there is any action called on the GRDD, and that kind of requires access to this partition, then this partition is going to be recomputed at that point of time. So even if you lose one of your partitions, that's okay, because that's going to be recomputed, and your entire RDD won't be recomputed because only the failed partition has to be re-executed. And this is how it looks like. Your partition, one of the partition which was failed gets recomputed, gets saved into memory of one of the machine. But here the problem is, if you don't want to suffer the latency caused or the delay caused due to recomputation of one of the partitions, this was a narrow transformation, like F was computed through a narrow transformation on CND. What if this F was computed through a wide transformation? In that case, a recomputation could have been a longer time. Well, can we have a duplicate copy of each cache partition? Well, the answer is yes, you can have a duplicate copy of each partition. Well, in that situation, the memory requirement is going to become double. So if you want to cache 100 gigs of data RDD, then you will require 200 gigs of memory, just the double in the previous case. But the benefit will be each partition is going to be saved in memory of two different machines, two distinct machines, so that even if one partition goes down, you have higher availability. This is a situation available. This is one of the facility available for the use cases where you don't want to, where your nodes keep on failing, you have, and you want higher availability guarantees to hit the cache. So now we have seen that you can keep the content in memory, or you can also keep the content in memory and disk combination if memory is not enough, or you don't want to aggressively load your memory. You can also have you have the provision, or you have the feature to keep a duplicate copy of your partition in memory. All these things are decided by a storage level. A storage level specifies how and where to cache the RDD. We have different storage levels. The first storage level is the default, which is the memory only, where we keep the RDD as deserialized Java objects in the JVM. Remember, Java objects have their own overhead of headers and some kind of hash. So your actual data and your Java object can be much different. It could be like 3 to 4 times of difference you will observe. You may read a file which is 100 gigabytes, but the corresponding JVM representation could be, say, 300 gigabytes or 400 gigabytes. So more often it will be higher than the size of the data file, because JVM objects have their overhead and it's kept in a deserialized manner. So access to the objects is super fast. Memory requirement is also huge. Well, if an RDD or some of the partitions of the RDD cannot fit into memory, if memory is not enough, so it is possible that some partitions are kind of kept in memory and some partitions are calculated whenever that need or the access to that partition happens. Well, if memory is not sufficient, you can choose a combination of memory and disk, which is the second option, memory and disk, where you can store the RDD again as a deserialized Java object. But this time we are saving it in memory, and we choose that if memory is not sufficient, store the partitions into disk. Well, accessing from local disk is slower than accessing from memory, but if your memory is not enough, and instead of reading from a distributed or a remote file system, reading from the local disk can be a faster alternative. The other option is to store data in a deserialized format. So serialized format. So far we have talked about deserialized Java objects, but you can also store the RDD as a serialized Java object. In that situation, all the content of the RDD is going to be serialized as a single byte array that is going to have lesser memory footprint. But if you want to access it, you will have to deserialize it back. So the CPU is going to be kind of loaded in this situation, but the memory footprint will be reduced sharply. So you can choose memory only serialized or memory and disk serialized. Both are the options, and both are similar to before, but this time instead of deserialized objects, you are using serialized objects, and you will have to deserialize whenever you want to read it. So if you don't have enough memory, and you can lose a few extra time to kind of for the deserialization, again, it doesn't take much time to deserialize, but there is an overhead at the CPU side. You can have disk only, where you say, I don't want to keep anything in memory, I want to keep everything on disk. This is also less frequently used, but one of the supported storage levels. Now, remember, we talked about you can keep, while caching, you can cache one partition at two machines, not one. This increases the availability, and that is very simple to express. When you say memory only with _2, it means you want the same partition to be saved twice. Similarly, memory and disk _2. And you have, if you can apply _2 memory only serialized, memory and disk serialized, and disk only storage levels as well. So the moment you see _2 towards the end of the storage level, it means you want to keep a duplicate copy of that partition cache on some other distinct machine. Let's try to get ahead and talk about what to cache. Remember, caching has got a higher memory footprint, so try to cache only those fields as well as only those records which are going to benefit your application. In this case, if you try to cache the first RDD, this first RDD has been created directly from the file. And if you see the pipeline, we don't require all the records of that RDD. So that if you try to cache the first RDD, well, you can, but that will have a huge memory requirement. The second RDD, which is obtained after filtering the first RDD, if you try to cache this, well, this is a better candidate, right? Because you don't cache all the data. You cache only filtered records. The third RDD, where we have selected fields, specific fields, is even better, because now instead of pruning the records, we are pruning the fields. We are kind of narrowing down to which fields do we actually need in the further processing. So that should have an even lower memory requirement, unless you are trying to do something like a flat map operation and creating multiple records on top of it. Well, in this case, what I feel is the result RDD, which is obtained after a shuffle operation of join of two RDDs, is perhaps most appropriate choice to cache the RDD, because this is the RDD over which we are performing different actions. So this so you can think in that direction, like which caching of which RDD will give you the best performance or a better performance in your pipeline execution. So what we have seen is caching of RDD does not kick in until any action is called either on it or any of its downstream descendant. Once the RDD is cached, we will see that in the hands-on in the next video, that you will be able to see the content, not content, but the size of the cached RDDs and which RDDs are cached from the storage tab of the UI. Remember, in the UI, there are different tabs: jobs, stages, executors, environment. Storage is also one of the tab we will visualize in the coming video, in the next lesson itself. Do not cache unnecessary data. Filter out the records or fields not needed by the downstream dependencies. Carefully choose the storage and replication level. We can choose both, where to store and how to store. Unpersist the data whenever it's not needed in the application. However, when the application finishes, data will be uncached, it will be unpersisted, but doing so explicitly can free up the memory during the application itself, so that the other parts of the application have a higher chance or have the better amount of memory available for their cache. Unpersisting is, on the other side, instantaneous. So the moment you call unpersist, it's going to act immediately, and that cached RDD is going to get removed from the memory. Let's talk about one example of one use case of caching. So let's say we have a user details file, which is a bigger file, and it contains mostly static information about what is the user ID, username, address, and age of the user. It's going to get updated less frequently, once every day. And every 15 minutes, we have activity of the user coming in. So this is example has been taken from one of the health product providing company, which creates different applications, and that application monitors different activity of the user, like whether the user is walking, whether the user is standing, running, sleeping, sitting, doing exercise, jogging, and so on. So that activity of the user is coming up as a file every 15 minutes, and that activity contains the user ID along with timestamp, action, what was the type of the action, what was the location, and so on. So we have different user activities coming up at different frequencies, different times at the 15 minutes of frequency. And now we have need to join these two tables, user details with user activity, on the basis of the user ID, so that we can get the activity along with the age of the user and name of the user. Remember, in the user activity, we don't have the name or age. We have the user ID, and in the user details, we have the user ID corresponding to which there is user activity. Now, so we have to join this user details, which is very much static. It updates every day, to a dynamic user activity file coming up every 15 minutes. So how can you do that? One is to run the join every 15 minutes. Well, that's going to cause lots of shuffle. Every 15 minutes, you join a bigger user detail with user activity. It's possible, but perhaps it's not the best in terms of performance or in terms of the efficiency. Moreover, your join may or may not complete in 15 minutes, depending upon the size of the user details, user activity file, and the cluster resources you have. The other point is caching the user activity. Well, user activity is generated every 15 minutes. So once that result is gathered for the join, that batch or the file of user activity which has been received recently is no longer used. After, in the next join, we will have received a new user activity file. So caching the user activity will perhaps not give you that much benefit. The third is caching the user details, which can give you a better performance bonus, because now you are caching the user detail. It is kept in memory. User activity can keep on coming, and it's going to avoid reading from the file. User detail will be available in the cache, in the memory, so that instead of reading the user details again and again every 15 minutes, you read from the memory. So that's going to be a good performance boost. But there is one more option over here. Now think of a situation. We are trying to join the user details with user activity on the basis of user ID. Even if user details is in memory, it has been loaded from the file, it is kept in memory. Well, you cannot avoid shuffle over here. One way to avoid shuffle is, maybe user activity is a small file, you can broadcast it. But think of a situation, user activity is not small enough to be broadcasted. You have to undergo a shuffle join, and for that, user details will also have to be shuffled. Well, keeping user details in memory is again better as compared to reading from file over and again. But here it can be even better, and that is by repartitioning the user details on the basis of user ID and then saving each partition. Well, if you have that kind of situation where, let's say, this is one partition of user detail, this is second partition, and so on, and we know that it is partitioned into, say, 10 partitions on the basis of user ID, and it is kept in memory. Now, when user activity file arrives, you partition it into the same number of partitions on the basis of the user ID, which is 10 partitions. And then there will be a partition to partition join. So in the join, it will turn out that both your user details as well as user activity files are pre-processed. They are pre-partitioned on the user ID into equal or exact multiple number of partitions, and hence the joins will be narrow transformation. It won't be a wide transformation. You know which two partitions to pick during joins because they are pre-processed. Here, only the user activity table or only the user activity file has to be shuffled to generate this kind of partitioning. It has to be repartitioned on the basis of user ID into the same or exact multiple number of partitions. So again, when you cache the user details, since this user details is going to get refreshed every day, so you can have a separate thread that can reload that RDD and cache it again every day. So we have seen one example And this is how it looks visually. This brown RDD is say user details, and the light green is the user activity. You have to join it on the basis of user ID. So we repartition and cache our RDD, the bigger RDD. And whenever a new user activity comes, we repartition it. So that's the only place where shuffle is involved on the basis of user ID. And then we join it, partition to partition join. And hence that speeds up the entire process. Next, we are going to take a look at the hands-on on caching. We are going to analyze healthcare data set as a part of that practice. And once we are done with that, we will talk about accumulators in the coming videos. Thank you for watching this.